Hello folks, Morphy here. I'm here today with Jackson Wheat, something I've been looking forward to for a long time. Jackson, as most of you are aware, is a very smart guy, but in the unusual circumstance that you're a subscriber to me and not a subscriber to Jackson, hop over there and subscribe to his channel and you might just learn an awful lot about biology. So welcome, Jackson.
Thanks for having me.
This is absolutely my pleasure. As I say, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. So if we could just start with something I actually don't know, which is your story. Have you always been an atheist, or were you religious and then changed your mind at some stage? What exactly is your story? How did you get to where you are?
Yeah. Let's see. I went on Godless Engineers channel a couple years ago, and I kind of gave the overview, and it's something I've thought about since then. Something I've increasingly thought about is, would I ever say that I was religious? I'm not sure. I decided to start calling myself an atheist between 10 and 11, when I really started to think about what does it mean to believe in God and that sort of stuff. But before that, I think I really only believed, if I ever did, because I was raised in a religious household, not fundamentalist or anything like that. I was never creationist. And so after about somewhere between 10 and 11, I was an atheist, and I kind of went on from there, and I'm still an atheist, and I've thought more, you would hope, about why I don't believe in any deities. I really became an atheist when I decided to do what the Bible tells you is, if you're praying sincerely, be alone by yourself, and pray. And I tried that. I was like, hey, a sign would be nice. And here I am, over 10 years later. So, if there was any sign, I must have missed it, or whatever. And I think at this point now, religion is in general probably an adaptation, or at least in some original capacity was an adaptation. There's the analogy of, like, you're an ape on the savannah in Africa and you hear the bushes rustling. Well, it could be a predator, or it could be the wind. Well, if you perceive, if you have a mutation and you perceive agency in the bush, you're less likely to be eaten than someone who doesn't. So perhaps it originally evolved in that capacity, and it's sort of taken on new roles as we have developed in our cognition. Our brain is is substantially larger in cranial capacity than the other apes. So still an atheist, and we'll see where that takes me, I guess.
So, if you don't mind me asking, you said you grew up in a religious household, but not fundamentalist. Are your parents okay now with your current position?
I think they try not to think about it, if I'm being honest. My grandmother, or one of my grandmothers, actually is a creationist. She sent me a book and I still have it. It was written in 1967. It's titled "Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation?" And what's so fascinating about that book is it has word for word arguments you would hear from creationists today. Word for word. Genetic entropy, why are there still monkeys? It even attacks natural selection, weirdly enough. You think, who's arguing against that? But back in those days, there was people like George McCready Price argued against natural selection and speciation. It took a long time for creationism to kind of catch up in that regard. But we're a Methodist household, so we're not fundamentalist here in this house.
Perhaps you should send your grandmother a copy of your book, the one that you wrote with RJ.
Oh, Actually, my cousin one of my cousins bought it and sent it to her. I don't know if she'll read it, but I'm not worried about it. I don't know. I kind of cringe at the thought of arguing with grandmother during Thanksgiving about whether or not God exists and all that, or uncle, whatever. I kind of cringe at all that. That's what the internet's for.
Yeah, I don't blame you there at all. Okay, Jackson, I've got a few things that I wanted to talk to you about, and at this time, I guess everybody's just talking about coronavirus, and it's probably going to date most of what we do here. Anybody watches it and we're talking about coronavirus, everybody's going to know it's 2020, and this was the cases just before we started this discussion. I actually went on just while I was waiting for you to get home from work. And yeah, this morning when I got up, it was only just ticked over 2,400,000, and now it's at 2,481. And yeah, the USA are very much number one here on the list. Now, what I really want to know from you, first off, is I know that you're working as a cashier. It's obviously the job you do to support your studies and things. Are you staying safe while you're at work?
I endeavor to do so. We have like hand sanitizer and gloves and masks and all that fun stuff. We're supposed to stay 6 feet apart and all that, and we have to scrub down everything, it seems like, multiple times a day. So we're trying to keep people as safe as we can.
Do you have plastic screens between you and customers?
Well, funny story, actually. We do, but they're kind of in the wrong spot. It's like if you were sneezing in the direction of the monitor, then hey, the monitor would be safe, but I wouldn't be. So they tried, I guess.
Mm-hmm. It worries me slightly that you're staying 6 feet apart, because being from a country that uses metric, we're told 2 meters, and 6 feet is a bit less than 2 meters.
Well, USA, all I can say.
Okay, let's move on. This is about coronavirus too. I picked this tweet up again while I was just waiting for you to come on, and yeah, it hits a few nails on the head, doesn't it?
The first one is very very funny, because under Obama, people were saying that the liberals are going to put people in camps, right? Whereas now under Trump, it's grandma's not really doing a whole lot, right? So, yeah. Oh, God. Blue Lives Matter. We can expose cops to coronavirus while we protest. Yeah, that's definitely accurate. Break the law should be separated. We're bringing our kids to quarantine protests. Yeah, that's just tragic. I don't know if you've been watching the people protesting right now, like with guns, and out in front of, they're out on the street, and they're in huge crowds, just throngs of people with weapons and no masks, and they're calling the coronavirus a hoax and all this sort of stuff. Of course, USA, it's just tragic.
Well, they've got to have their weapons with them, because how else are they going to attack 5G towers?
There was a meme that was like telling people in Texas you can't shoot the coronavirus, and someone's like loading Purell into a revolver.
There was somebody, it's funny, it's exactly what you were saying about the guys out there with the guns, and somebody tweeted this morning a picture of them and said, why do these guys always look the same? And And I just replied with, maybe it's easier to clone fuckwits.
Probably. I mean, you see the same kind of people always out there protesting. All these we're protesting whether they're trying to put restrictions on the sale of weapons, things like that. We're gonna grab our guns and we're gonna go march around because that's safe. Yeah, not the brightest. Well,
following on from what you just said, I picked this one up, and I have to admit, I picked it up. It was retweeted by Robert Reed, and I must admit that I was moved to tears by this one, and I think Michigan was one of the places I saw where there were protests, and then I just think that people who are out protesting should perhaps look at the picture of this little girl.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were talking about earlier, this isn't the first time that disease outbreaks have happened in Michigan. They were protesting vaccines a few years back, and that caused an outbreak of measles. Well, the same in California, all the natural remedies, and you start putting away the vaccines, and then, that's weird. Well, why is there an outbreak of the measles and all this other stuff that we had eradicated? Why is it coming back? Yeah, this is truly tragic that this would happen. And I have customers, and I talk to them, and it's usually older people. I think younger people tend to realize, hey, this is kind of a threat to society and to health. But older people, on average, at least that I've talked to here, where I live, not in general, but just where I live, because we're in the South, say, oh, I'm over the coronavirus. Oh, it's not nearly as bad as they make it out to be. Okay. Even if you think that it's not as bad as the media makes it sound, which, considering Fox News has been saying it's not as bad as the flu, at least be concerned about others. Older people are at higher risk of diseases anyway, so even if it's as bad as the flu, you're still putting other people at risk. But of course, if it inconveniences me, I'm just going to ignore it, I guess. So that's one way to look at it.
Yeah, it's sad. Do you want to talk a little bit about your channel? I watch your channel fairly regularly. Some of the biology is a bit heavy for me. I'm from a maths background rather than a biology background. I really enjoyed the one you did about coronavirus last week.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I figured, hey, why not jump on the coronavirus bandwagon and start. I don't think there are any videos or I don't know if there are any videos on my channel about how I started my channel. Have you ever heard me talk about it?
No.
Well, strap right in. Well, back in 2016, so I just graduated from high school and I was going to LSU Baton Rouge. Well, I got there like a week before school started. Getting out of the house and going to be independent and all that malarkey. Well, there were these people protesting down at the student union. Well, they weren't really protesting. They were out handing out flyers and pamphlets and all that. And they were talking to people. And I think they were like a nationalist group. It was very peculiar. But regardless, one of them just kind of waves their arm and hands me a pamphlet. And I was just like protecting my face. And so I take it and I was kind of flipping through it and looking at it. And I was like, this is some weird stuff. And part of it was the liberals mandate that evolution be taught in school. And I kind of stopped and I was like, and I went back to the guy who handed it to me and I was like, excuse me, what do you mean by this? And so this guy who is a creationist, I started talking to him and I was laying out like argument after argument after argument. And everything he said, he'd say, oh, well, what about this? And I was like, oh, well, there's this and this and this and this. and we talked for like 45 minutes, and I could just see him getting flustered, and eventually he brings up an example I'd never heard of before, which was this woodpecker, which he claimed, well, he didn't claim it, some creationists claim it, he was repeating the argument, where it has a tongue that goes like through the nostril and into the mouth. It's totally bogus. The tongue of this woodpecker is completely normal. Actually, Tony Reed has done a video about it. Well, I had never heard of this woodpecker before, and I was like, I don't know anything about this. And I could just see the relief on his face. Finally, he got me, right? And so he recommends this channel to me called Evolutionless, which was the first like 4 videos I made. Or I made one intro and then the Evolutionless videos where I was responding to them, but they were just so bad I got bored and gave up. But so I branched out and started doing other things. And I met Tony Reed and Paula Gia and RJ and AronRa and all these other people, you know, and done collabs. And you, of course, you know, doing collabs and talking to people, and it's all great fun. I'm enjoying it.
That's great. This is your latest one, Precambrian ancestors. How can we know very much about those? Because don't we have very, very few fossils?
Yeah. So this video was inspired because of a new fossil, the fossil Icaria warutia, which is that little pink wormy guy in there. When Charles Darwin published Origin of Species, the lowest layers he was aware of were the Silurian. So we're talking Paleozoic. You know, trilobites had been around for over 100 million years by this point. I think around 100 million years, we'll say. Complex life was already in existence doing neat stuff. Well, after Darwin, in the early 1900s, you had this guy named Charles Doolittle Walcott, and he finds the Burgess Shale, which is the first Cambrian Lagerstätten. Lagerstätten is an exceptionally preserved fossil site. There are lots of sites like this across the planet. Actually, over in your neck of the woods is the Ediacara Hills, which is the most famous Ediacaran Lagerstätte. That's where you find Dickinsonia and Kimberella and all those sorts of late Precambrian guys. It wasn't until the 1960s when actually the very first Precambrian fossils were discovered. And so there's a window of time, or you have the Cambrians, you have complex organisms, and you have this window of time, the Ediacaran, in which basically complex life is taking off, and it's about to make the jump in the Precambrian, in the Cambrian. And there are very few identifiable fossils from this time period. Some things like Dickinsonia were argued about for years before finally it turns out, okay, it is an animal, it is a bilaterian, maybe a very basal bilaterian. Things like Kimberella, which might be a spiralian, so part of the group with like, it might be a basal member of the group that contains like rotifers and octopus and bivalves and all that. And so this guy, Icaria warutia, is a bilaterian. And so what's interesting about this is its body form was predicted by researchers because evolution makes predictions. This little guy, Icaria, is what researchers predicted the maker of the tracks are an ichthyofossil called Helminthoid dicnites, and they predicted it would have looked like this, and this little kind of bag-like guy with anterior posterior differentiation and a gut and all that. And surely enough, they found the body fossils for it. And so this is one of our very distant cousins in the late Ediacaran from the White Sea assemblage, which is kind of in the late in the late Ediacaran, you have the Avalon, the White Sea, and the Nama assemblages, and this guy comes from the White Sea, and so yeah, so these are sort of the early bilaterians. That's what you're finding in Ediacaran, which are very hard to identify because they possess some of the characters of later groups, but they're so deep in prehistory, it's hard to really differentiate them.
So
diagnose them.
If we could just put this into something that maybe somebody like myself can understand, this was predicted by scientists on the basis of the structure of later animals. Now, do you know of any predictions that creationism makes that works in the same way?
It's funny because you have guys like Nathaniel Jensen, who's one of the head creationist guys, and what he predicts is that if you look at the modern amount of variation in humans, and you assume that God created humans with a certain amount of variation already within them, which is called created heterozygosity, you can predict the rate at which the genes would have been, or the alleles would have been disseminated throughout the different populations. So that's not really a prediction, that's a sort of model showing the dissemination, but nothing's really being predicted. And if you ask them to predict a fossil, well, they can't, because things like Tiktaalik and Archaeopteryx and Diarthrognathes shouldn't exist. There should be no link between birds and reptiles, no link between reptiles and mammals or fish and amphibians. There's no reason for these things to exist. They can't make predictions about strata or about fossils or about what sort of moth should be feeding on this species of orchid, because nothing in creationism necessitates anything. Feasibly, they could just abandon genetic entropy and make predictions and just pretend we never believed in genetic entropy. Of course, organisms can get more complex. We predicted that. Creationism doesn't necessitate anything, and because it doesn't, they can always make predictions and just keep goalpost shifting. And so, no, there are no predictions that I'm aware of that they've ever made.
Thank you. That was the thinking man's answer to my rather simplistic question. And I haven't actually watched this debate, but it's on my list of things that I'm going to. And
apart make sure to have something strong.
Just before you give me a very quick rundown of this particular debate, do you not always find it interesting that people that call themselves things like standing for truth or have truth in their title in some way are actually not interested in truth at all?
Yeah, faithful, honest, and true, standing for truth. It's no surprise to me that all these channels that have truth in the name, or all these people, have no care for truth whatsoever. And you're right. It's a little ironic, but oh well. A rundown of the debate. In essence, it was Standing and I. That was not long after he kind of first started doing talks and things with people. He did 2 talks on my channel. It was very cordial. It was very polite and everything. So we did those, and then he challenged me to a debate on modern day. I don't know if have you ever seen the debate between Matt Dillahunty and Saitun Bergenkate?
Yes, indeed.
So you know how Matt pre-wrote his rebuttal because he knew what Sai was going to say?
Yes, indeed.
That's what we did. We pre-wrote my rebuttal. The guys who edit my scripts, who I work on things with, Nestlig and Rational Mind and RJ, we knew everything Standing was going to say. We knew all the arguments he was going to make. So we specifically wrote the rebuttal to answer all of his points, and he mentioned everything in his opening statement and in his first rebuttal, and I was like, "Let's go."
Did you just go? Did you just go tick 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 as he was talking?
Oh yeah. He hasn't asked me for a debate since then, and I know he's debated loads of people, and some of them more than once. He never asked me for a debate after that, so I consider that a win.
Indeed.
But good luck with that, with watching it.
A couple of collaborations you did. I spotted this one that you did with AronRa. Was that fun?
Absolutely. That was the first. Yes, that was the first video in my zoology playlist. I was thinking about starting a new playlist, and zoology's been kind of slow on that one. But I started to do it, and I asked Aaron. I said, "Hey, do you want to collaborate on this?" And he said, "Sure." Humorously enough, later, PragerU put out a video. They had Stephen Meyer come on, who's not a paleontologist, he's a philosopher. But they had him come on, and he basically gave a sort of overview of his book, Darwin's Doubt, which was written in 2013, or published in 2013. And so we did a whole rebuttal to that, and Aaron messaged me on Twitter saying, I want to do a rebuttal against this. Can I use parts of your video? And I was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Everything I put out there, and this just goes for anyone generally, if I put it out on the internet, it's fair game. Do whatever you want with it. You don't really need my permission to use my stuff. But I was like, sure, go ahead. He didn't use clips of the video. He just put my whole video in one that he did, which I was very honored. I was, being able to do a collaboration and stuff, it's great. I love doing stuff like this. I love being able to talk to people. So it's not always just one way. I love getting feedback and having these dialogues because they're very insightful and also fun.
That's great. This is my first few videos were about this discussion.
Yeah. Oh Lord. Matt Powell. Yeah. Oddly enough, I have heard pretty much nothing from him since he put out that movie a while back. Because he I don't even remember what it was called, honestly. Which is funny because I've seen creationist movies, and I usually remember like Genesis, Paradise Lost. What's another one I've seen? The Bible, or Genesis History, or is Genesis History? I can usually remember. I don't even remember what the name of his was. But Godless Cranium asked me to come on and talk to Matt Powell. And I'm not a space person, but he kept asking me questions about space. I don't know anything about that area. I kept trying to get him to talk about evolution. He never really did. Talked about soft tissue, talked about carbon dating, just all these other things. And I don't... What I really wanted to do, what I should have tried to do, was get him, and I kind of tried at the very end, was get him to give me his explanation of how evolution works. But we never got to that point. We spent like, hour 20 minutes approximately talking about just random things. I way over prepared for that talk. And I don't know if you know, he actually posted a video on his channel where he clipped out all of my sections, all of my segments. So wherever I spoke, he clipped it out. And so he made it seem like he would talk and I just wouldn't have an answer. And so we just skip to the next part. Well, someone took his video and took this one and was like, and this is the part Matt cut out, and then played my segment. And it was beautiful. I was like, oh, thank you. Yeah, but that talk was a doozy, and I don't know what he's doing now. I haven't thought about him in a long time.
Yeah, I love that one. I don't know if you remember David Silverman when he was on Fox News, and it was the tide goes in, tide goes out, and you see
You
the
can't
look,
explain that.
you see the
Yeah.
look on his face, and
Yeah. Tide goes out.
and the look on your face was exactly the same when he's talking about the sun burning up and the air's different in space, and the look on your face was very much like that.
Yeah, I was like, am I dreaming? What happened? um, yeah, I was trying to give him I understand from a distance, like the principle. It's the sun's not burning; it's fusing, right? It's fusing hydrogen and helium, and that's the whole E equals MC square. And I, you know, very, very, very basically understand that. But he kept going on about space and space and space. I told him a couple of times in that talk. I'm not an astronomy person. If you want to talk about astronomy, there are loads of people out there. But yeah, he says some crazy stuff. He said a lot of crazy things during his movie. He says to what is it, the Raging Atheist? Did the meteor decapitate the dinosaurs? If you get hit by an 8-mile object traveling from space, you're not going to get decapitated. You're going to get vaporized. So, yeah.
That is.
When I heard that, I was like, what?
That's absolutely priceless. It's incredible.
Yeah, you have to wonder. Did he come up with that, or did someone else come up with that and he parroted it? I honestly wonder about that. I really don't know.
Talking of your collaborations.
Yep.
The book.
That would be. Sorry.
The Rocks Were There. I noticed somebody actually calls themselves The Rocks Were There on Twitter now.
Really?
Really?
How curious. There's an Answers in Rocks guy who I know.
Yeah, I've seen that as well, but I saw one by somebody called The Rocks Were There as well.
I'll have to look that. That's very interesting. Very interesting. I did not know that. Yes. That's the brainchild of RJ and me. That's the first of two. See, it's volume 1. We're writing a second volume. And so this book is already the most comprehensive counter-creationist book that exists. And there's going to be a second one. So, I met RJ, I guess, back in 2017, I think it was 2017. Well, I met RJ, and I just remember immediately RJ strikes me as one of the most intelligent people on the internet. He knows something about everything. And I decided to get the Answers in Genesis, the New Answers 1 book. So I got that, and I said, RJ, do you want to write a rebuttal of this one? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Well, and then I found out there were 3 more. And so we decided, let's rebut all of them. And so we did. And so this is part 1 of that. We've got, the next book is also going to be 7 chapters. It's going to be very exciting. I'm very excited to write it. And then we've got more projects planned in the future. So, don't think that that this is all.
That's great. So just before we started recording, we were talking about this, and I asked you if it was available as an audio book, and you said no. But I really think that your people should speak to Seth Andrews' people.
He might try to whack us if we ask him to read our book. It would have to be, as RJ will tell you, it would have to be rewritten. At least certain parts of it would, because we're verbose, and that's okay when you're writing a book because you're laying out the entire argument. But if someone's going to read that, it's not necessarily necessary for them to read the title of a paper, which we do occasionally throw out the title of the paper in the book. We'd have to reword some things here and there. I'd let RJ handle all of that, but theoretically we could. Someone could do it. I think Dawkins narrated like the Ancestor's Tale, didn't he? So if he can do that, someone can do this.
I just think it's good. We've got RJ, and they've got SJ, and I'd much rather have RJ.
Oh, SJ Thomas. Have you seen the post by Amateur Exegete on the plagiarism in her book?
Nope.
Big yikes. Amateur Exegete, actually. I know him for realsies, so that's fun. But yeah, check out. He's an account you'll probably want to follow on Twitter. He's brilliant. I love reading his stuff. I've actually had him on my channel. Yeah, he's done a couple of posts. SJ really plagiarized a couple of different sections of her book. So, yikes.
That's priceless.
Yeah.
So, you're speaking to me after you've been at work. You're a student. You've written books. You do your YouTube channel, and the stuff on there is very, very high quality. So I have to ask the question, the rest of us get 24 hours.
Well, I'm a part-time worker, for one thing. Well, that doesn't really help me a whole lot. Let me put it this way. I am, 15 hours of school right now? Well, it was. So 15 hours plus around 30 hours a week at work. So in total, my total work school is about 45 hours or so. And I have pretty much the rest of the time to play video games and write. I don't know. I don't really think about how much time it takes. I feel like I have loads of time to do things, whether it's projects or writing. I'm always writing. I think I write a little bit every day, just because I'll get an urge to put something down. And I have my own secret projects going on. So whether it's something with RJ or something in a script for a video or one of my secret projects, it's always something. I'm always thinking of something I got to write down, something I got to put somewhere. I don't know. I get a decent amount of sleep. I sleep like 7-8 hours a night, so I think I do all right. It's just time management, I guess. I don't know. I don't feel like I have a whole lot of work in school. That's my opinion.
So I just think that you're one of life's overachievers, and perhaps, unlike me, you don't spend hours and hours binging Netflix.
Yeah, I think I watch like one show right now, which is the Clone Wars TV show, because the final season came out after 7 years, so I'm watching it, and it's fantastic. I was watching You. Have you seen that show?
Nope.
It's real good. I'm plugging it right here. You is a good show. It's on Netflix. I don't know. I didn't really get into Tiger King. I watched the first 2 episodes and I thought, okay, that's enough crazy for me.
So,
are you watching that one?
Nope.
Oh, well. At any rate.
So what prompted this tweet?
That's a good question. I will think random thoughts during the day, and we're all on Twitter for attention, and I want attention for my thoughts. Because I'm like, hey, look at me, I had a light bulb moment. But there's truth to this. It's not that it's just hyperbole. I have actually had this engagement with creationists. They will deny all abiogenesis experiments. They will tell you it doesn't matter if you're talking about RNA World or the Montmorillonite clay or the alkaline vents. Nothing you tell them matters. They'll just write it off. They'll say, "Who cares?" They won't ever talk about the chemistry of it or the biochemistry. They won't ever get to that point. They just kind of go, "Nope, not gonna touch me." And even when you read like the stuff in Answers in Genesis, they just kind of go, "Oh, just go away." They don't get into the technical stuff. And so that's the first part. They'll deny like all abiogenesis experiments. They say they're unrealistic. They're not natural. Well, at the same time, they will take certain experiments. Coral is one example. The abiogenic oil, which was made in the lab, is another example. Opal is another one, which T.D. Lane posted about under that. They'll take experiments, again, which are not mirroring natural conditions, like growing abnormally large coral under like perfect conditions, which don't exist in nature, making oil, making opal, very specific types of oil and opals. And they'll say, if they can do this in the lab, then the flood could have done it. Okay, if you read the papers, Andrew Snelling posted 2 papers about oil formation in the lab. Abiogenic oil, so it's not oil formed by dead organisms and various geological processes. It's completely abiogenic, no living material involved. And the researchers say in the paper, this has nothing to do with natural conditions. This is nothing like biogenic oil. But Snelling doesn't tell you that. And Ariel Roth wouldn't tell you this about the coral. Because it's the switches. There's like, they want their one argument to be true, and anything they disagree with is just false. We're not even going to think about it. And so that's why I say pick a side, because it's totally up here on one side and totally down here on the other. There is no middle. Right? So...
No chat between us would be complete without mentioning your favorite apologist, who...
Great Comfort's my favorite. No.
Your second favorite apologist.
All right.
I see you regularly jumping all over his tweets, and you'd already jumped all over this one by the time I came to it. So would you like to share your thoughts on this?
I only attack him because it's so easy. As we were talking about before the show, he's kind of a parody of apologists. It's funny, which is, I think, especially funny because his bio is the intellectual side of Christianity. I think there are some intellectual apologists out there, like I mentioned Randall Rouser. I agree with what he says half the time. I can't find fault with it. Cameron, on the other hand, you have to try really hard to get us to agree on something. I think even if he said he loved meat lover pizza, I might decide to become a vegetarian. I just... In the case of this tweet, he says, premise 1, so he's setting up this syllogism. He says, premise 1, the existence of a life-permitting universe is improbable in naturalism. Premise 2, the existence of a life-permitting universe is not improbable in theism. Conclusion, the existence of a life-permitting universe is evidence for theism over naturalism. The problem is, the both premises are entirely unfounded. The existence of a life-permitting universe is improbable in naturalism. We don't know that. Nobody knows that. It could be true. In my personal opinion, I'm actually of the opinion that life is probably relatively difficult to get started, but facts don't care about opinions. So even if I could be wrong. It could be that life is an inevitable product of geochemistry giving rise to biochemistry. It could happen. Could be true. I think Stephen Jay Gould was of that position. Oddly enough, inspiring philosophy is of that position. But So we don't know. We have no way to know if a life-permitting universe is improbable on naturalism. We just don't know. There's no way to quantify that. So, totally unfounded. The existence of a life-permitting universe is not improbable on theism. How does he know? Theism doesn't necessitate that universe be life-permitting. It only necessitates that a god exists, or gods. That's it. Literally nothing else follows from that. What he's attempting to smuggle in here is the existence of a life-permitting universe is not improbable on his version of theism. Whatever, his Christian theism, according to him, necessitates that the universe be life-permitting. So again, completely unfounded. He's just assuming this completely without reason. So because both of his premises are totally unfounded, his conclusion is totally unfounded. It's just, we don't know, and why do you say that? So, and he makes these sorts of argument all the time. I don't know if you've seen Apologia's video on the puddle analogy.
Yes, I have indeed.
Yeah. So his videos are the same. It's this, like, are you being for real right now? When you watch it, because it's, I don't know if maybe he believes all of this. Okay, fine, great. He really doesn't seem to be thinking this through. I don't know. I don't know what he thinks. I don't know how he comes to these conclusions. He doesn't run them by anyone, because this sounds like, just on the face of it, sure, it sounds fine. It might be the kind of argument a creationist proposes, but I think if you were to come across like any kind of upper echelon apologist, I don't know if they would necessarily agree. I don't know if William Lane Craig would agree with this, or Randall Rouser. I don't know. I would hope not, because I don't even know if a life-permitting universe is improbable on naturalism. So it sounds nice, but it doesn't mean anything. It's basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, what I've seen from him a lot lately is a lot of these statements that he tries to structure as if it's a syllogism, but it's just full of nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. I posted, and I don't pay attention to apologists on Twitter that much if they're just kind of general Christian apologists, because I don't do atheism content really. The atheist more. I don't make videos trying to debunk God like Vice Rhino or Alex O'Connor or someone like that. I'm just kind of doing, how do we know evolution is true? Why is creationism wrong? That kind of stuff. And so when I see arguments from Cameron, and it's like, if I can debunk your sort of pseudo-philosophical argument, what does that say about your argument? I'm not really a philosophy person, but I read his stuff and I think, wow, this is bad. And it seems to be getting worse over the last few months. I don't remember reading his stuff and thinking, wow, this is terrible, several months back. It really just seems to be recent. I don't know, maybe he's found a new favorite apologist who's making these arguments and he's repeating them. I don't know.
Maybe social distancing is just affecting him badly.
Entirely possible, I guess. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure I'll have more things to say about his tweets in the future.
Jackson, since you are an expert biologist, there is something that I really do not understand in biology, and I've tried, and I'm just not getting it. And I'm hoping that you'll explain it to me. And no, it's not that. It's not that. It's Mitochondrial Eve.
Okay. Well, first and foremost, I'm not an expert biologist. I'm a biology student. I don't even have my bachelor's yet. I get that in December. But, and by the way, when I do get it, I'm going to tweet. I now have one more. With my first degree, I have one more degree than Kent Hovind. But anyways. So Mitochondrial Eve. So your mitochondrian, or every mitochondrion in your body was at one point in the very distant past its own organism. Mitochondria is actually a bacterium, a relative of the bacteria Rickettsia, which causes a typhus. So, not rickets, oddly enough. So, you get your mitochondria from your mother because your sperm cells are too small to carry mitochondria. Technically, they can carry a few mitochondria. It sounds really gross. It's this process called paternal leakage. Sounds like an STD. But technically, males can, on rare occasions, contribute some of their mitochondria. But, like I said, it's unusual. So, barring paternal leakage, it just sounds dirty saying that. Anyways, your mitochondria come from your mother because the egg cell is much, much larger than sperm cells. And so the egg cell holds the mitochondria. Well, your mitochondria, because they're once their own organism, they have their own genome. You have a mitochondrial genome. So all of your cells basically, or your cells basically have two genomes. You have your nuclear genome, which is all your stuff, and your mitochondrial genome, which is stuff from the bacteria, but also stuff that has been imported from the nuclear genome. But different populations of individuals have differing segments of the mitochondrial genome. You have these things in your mitochondrial genome. You have these things. You have these segments, and when they mutate, or as they mutate, and people move across the planet, everyone was leaving Africa. Some went to Europe. Some went to Asia. Some went to Australia. They form these things called haplogroups. So the haplogroups are when people live or are moving to a particular area, they are interbreeding, and so they're passing along whatever mutations that are happening in their mitochondrial genome. They're passing these on, and so populations have distinct mutations associated with them. If you're of Native American descent, you're going to have a distinct set of mutations in your mitochondrial genome. If you're of Australian Aborigine descent, you're going to have a distinct set of mutations. And so these haplogroups denote biogeography, right? Which is fascinating. And you can track them all the way back to Africa, because the largest suite of diversity in the mitochondrial genomes is in Africa. So, we can trace. So all humans, we share a common ancestor with other species, but all humans also share a common ancestor. We share, and this is where things get kind of funny, we have a most recent female common ancestor, which is so-called Mitochondrial Eve, and the most recent male common ancestor, which is so-called Y chromosome Adam. And it's the same process for Adam. You're just using the Y chromosome instead of the mitochondria. But you track mitochondria back, and it's something like the last female common ancestor of all modern humans lived about 140,000 years ago or so in East Africa. Now, she is called Eve because scientists have a sense of humor. Someone decided, what are we gonna name this most recent female common ancestor? Well, who is the archetypal female ancestor of humanity? Well, it's Eve. Same with Adam, the archetypal male ancestor. The problem is, when creationists and other people hear this, they think, oh, Adam and Eve, just like the Bible. No, not just like the Bible. Adam and Eve were, of course, the first people in the garden. They were created specifically. They were the only two humans on Earth. Mitochondrial Eve and Y chromosome Adam were not the only two people on Earth. They didn't even live at the same time. Each one was a member of a population of, probably dozens of individuals. But we can all trace our ancestry, our mitochondrial ancestry, back to mitochondrial Eve. But yes, she had a mother. She was not the first human. The human species has been around over 300,000 years. Y chromosome Adam was not the first male human. Again, he lived about 100,000 years ago, somewhere around there. So they're just individuals in a population, and it just so happens that when we track back the mutation rate for the Y chromosome and for mitochondria, we come to these dates, and they're both in Africa because Africa is the cradle of human evolution. Did I clear it up, or did I make it worse?
You did clear it up. I don't know if this is a good analogy, but when you're talking about the diversity in Africa, the analogy that I heard was if you go to England and you travel about, you get different accents by traveling just a very small distance. Whereas if you come to somewhere like Australia, pretty much everybody speaks with the same accent over the whole vast continent of Australia. And that's how we know that English actually derived in England.
Yes, that's a very good analogy. Yes, because the diversity is so much more vast around the origin than other places. Yes, that's a good analogy.
I think I spoke to you beforehand about scientists, calling it Eve and Adam sort of lends itself to creationist jumping on it. And I just had this thought that if we discovered an allele for strength that also made your hair grow really quickly, that some scientists might call it the Samson gene.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. Scientists have a sense of humor. To give you an example, I was reading about an arthropod, this fossil arthropod, recently, which was named Garagnostus Waldorf-Statleri, because the rear end of it, the paleontologist said, looked like Waldorf and Statler from the Muppets. Another example is there's a fossil turtle named Ninjames. The etymology is ninja turtle, because it literally says in the paper, an allusion to that totally radical, fearsome foursome epitomizing shelled success, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, yeah, who says scientists don't have a sense of humor?
Jackson, thanks so much for coming on. It's been great. I've seen you started to yawn there because I know it's very late your time. But it's been an absolute blast talking to you. I've wanted to talk to you for absolutely ages. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I love coming on people's channels and talking about stuff.
That's great. Maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.